The world as you know it is defined by boundaries. We exist in 3 spatial dimensions: length, width, and depth. We move along a 4th, time. These dimensions grant objects volume, separation, and interaction. Imagine a sudden, absolute shift in fundamental reality. Consider this precise hypothetical event. All objects in the observable universe instantly lose 1 dimension of extent. Everything contracts, not in size, but in dimensionality. We are no longer 3-dimensional beings existing in 3-dimensional space. We become inhabitants of a 2-dimensional plane. This is the moment our perception irrevocably changes the hook. What if space itself suddenly forgot how to stretch into the 3rd direction? Physics demands this constraint immediately. Every single particle, every structure, every wave function instantly flattens. The concept of up, down, and forward vanishes. Only left, right, and a new strange forward remain. We transition from volume to surface. This is the instantaneous subtraction of 1 necessary degree of freedom. Our universe has just been rendered onto a cosmic sheet of paper. This is the loss of the z-axis, a silent, unpredicted cosmic collapse of structure. Our perceived reality becomes infinitely thin. The first ripples. The immediate consequences are absolute and terrifyingly fast. In the first microsecond, the integrity of all matter fails. Atoms rely on 3-dimensional orbitals for stability. Electrons, previously existing in 3-dimensional probability clouds, must now collapse. Their wave functions instantly resolve into 2-dimensional shapes. This new constraint is unphysical by current standards. Therefore, matter itself must instantaneously reorganize its fundamental structure. Nuclei, held together by the strong nuclear force across 3-dimensional space, must reconfigure their binding geometry. The first observable effect is catastrophic material failure. Solids, which derive their strength from resisting compression and shear across 3 axes, immediately lose 2/3 of their structural resistance. Buildings do not crumble in the conventional sense. They do not fall down because the concept of down has fractured. Instead, they smear. Imagine a perfectly constructed brick wall suddenly becoming a 2-dimensional decal. The forces holding the bricks together are now constrained to the surface plane. Tension lines, which previously traversed depth, snap instantaneously. Within the first second, the biosphere undergoes radical failure. Every living organism, from bacteria to the blue whale, is a 3-dimensional machine. Circulation systems rely on depth to move fluids across volumes. Lungs transfer oxygen across vast internal surface areas nestled in 3-dimensional space. This transfer mechanism immediately becomes a 2-dimensional impossibility. Blood vessels pinch, not from external pressure, but from the inability to hold cross-sectional area. The circulatory system, which requires depth for functional plumbing, ceases to pump life-sustaining fluid. Brain function, dependent on 3-dimensional neuronal networks, dissolves into planar chaos. Every complex life form dies within moments of the dimensional shift. Death here is not a biological process, it is a geometric imposition. The first day. By the end of the first hour, the atmosphere is in thermodynamic disarray. air molecules once existing in a three-dimensional gas are now confined to a thin, expanding surface layer. Pressure gradients, which drove weather systems, rely on density variations across altitude. Altitude is gone. The atmosphere rapidly disperses outward across the new surface of the Earth. There is no containment. The gas layer thins exponentially, rushing away from the central mass of the flattened continents. Global temperatures plummet toward absolute zero very quickly. The heat, previously retained and distributed volumetrically, leaks instantly across the vast new surface area created by the dimension loss. Oceans behave entirely differently. Water, losing its third dimension, spreads out. The immense pressure that once held the deep oceans captive vanishes. The water does not boil away due to lack of pressure. It simply spreads into a vast thin film. Waves, which require depth to propagate energy, transform into strange, linear disturbances moving across the new surface. The topography of the planet flattens significantly. Mountains, which are inherently three-dimensional features resisting gravity through mass distribution, lose their structural integrity. They do not erode. They smear into vast, smooth plains of compressed, flattened rock. The crust itself, subject to immense internal pressures in three dimensions, relieves that stress by spreading laterally. Tectonic plates collide and merge in a two-dimensional dance of immense silent surface shifting. Systemic collapse. Technology ceases to function universally. Electronics depend on the precise, three-dimensional routing of electrons through semiconductors. Transistors, the building blocks of computation, require depth to create the necessary channel resistance and insulation. When the third dimension is removed, the physical barrier separating conductive pathways vanishes or distorts beyond recognition. Every microchip, every power line, every copper wire instantly shorts out or fails structurally. The electrical grid collapses instantly. No signal can propagate reliably across a two-dimensional medium while maintaining structural integrity against neighboring pathways. Information transmission, the cornerstone of civilization, halts. Radio waves rely on three-dimensional propagation through the vacuum of space. Light itself, while surviving the transition surprisingly well because it is fundamentally about electromagnetic oscillation, now faces a problem with its source and destination. A light bulb requires internal volume for its filament and reflector. A laser needs three-dimensional alignment for coherent beam creation. Everything that requires depth to function simply ceases to be functional. Satellites, orbiting in three dimensions, find themselves suddenly constrained to a plane intersecting the Earth's new surface. Their orbital mechanics, based on three-body problem solutions, become instantaneously nonsensical in a two-dimensional context. They drift, following the momentum of their last three-dimensional vector across the surface plane until friction or collision stops them. Nature adapts in the most minimal way possible. Photosynthesis driven by light falling onto a surface continues briefly. Plants, however, have internal vascular systems for water transport. These systems fail immediately, mirroring the failure of animal circulation. Fungi and simpler, non-vascular organisms might persist slightly longer, existing as thin mats on the new global surface. These survivors are restricted to chemical gradients existing entirely on that plane. life reduces itself to the most basic chemical film. The complex structures that defined the terrestrial biome are erased by geometric necessity. The human perspective. For a single human observer, the experience is incomprehensible yet immediate. You do not feel yourself shrinking. You feel the entire external world suddenly becoming impossibly thin. Your vision, which relies on the convergence of light rays entering two eyes separated in three-dimensional space, is instantly corrupted. Stereo vision ceases. Everything appears flat, like a perfect photograph pasted before your eyes. Depth perception is replaced by an awareness of absolute surface location. Movement becomes bizarre. When you try to walk, you still possess residual momentum from your three-dimensional existence. You stumble forward, but the floor beneath you is now an infinitely extended plane. If you attempt to lift your foot, the action feels strangely incomplete. Lifting is defined by movement against gravity in the z-axis. Since the z-axis has collapsed, the muscle groups responsible for lifting feel disconnected, achieving only a lateral slide along the surface. Walking becomes sliding, a controlled skid across the flattened world. If you manage to observe another person before the collapse of their biological systems, the interaction is chilling. You see them as a perfect silhouette, perfectly defined on the plane. Their internal complexity, their organs, their skeletal structure are all projected onto that surface. You see the shadow of their interior, but nothing truly internal exists anymore. If they speak, the sound waves propagate across the surface, creating ripples in the flattened atmosphere. The vibration travels, but the sense of localized volumetric sound projection is lost. The sound arrives along the plane, lacking the rich occlusion and distance cues of three-dimensional acoustics. Communication ceases before understanding can develop. The panic, the sheer overwhelming existential terror of witnessing the universe disassemble its structure, is muted by the failure of the nervous system. The human brain, a three-dimensional organ, cannot process the input of a two-dimensional reality. Sensory data arrives, but the processing architecture itself is geometrically invalid. Consciousness, as we define it, requires three dimensions to map its complex state changes. The experience is likely a final, instantaneous cessation of meaningful internal processing, a systemic shutdown due to geometric incompatibility. The long view. Zooming out, the Earth is now a vast, thin, cooling disk. The solar system remains gravitationally bound, but the geometry of orbits has changed profoundly. Orbital mechanics must now be calculated in two dimensions. While Kepler's laws remain mathematically valid for planar orbits, the three-dimensional perturbations that govern long-term stability are gone. The planets move in perfect, predictable ellipses upon a single plane, the plane of the initial dimensional collapse. The Sun continues to burn, powered by fusion, which relies on incredibly dense three-dimensional pressure within its core. However, the light it emits now travels outward in a rapidly diminishing spherical pattern that has become a rapidly expanding circular pattern constrained to the plane of the former solar system. The intensity of the light reaching the flattened Earth decreases dramatically with distance across the plane. The universe has become incredibly sparse in the direction perpendicular to this plane. Cosmically, this scenario implies that the vacuum energy of the universe has changed its fundamental properties. The force-binding spacetime itself has reasserted a lower dimensional constraint. This suggests that the extra dimensions proposed by string theory or Kaluza-Klein theory were not necessarily curled up and microscopic. They were actively dimensionally present until this moment. Their instantaneous withdrawal is a cosmic reinitialization event. The laws of physics, as we understood them, were merely valid only within a specific dimensionality. Now, the universe operates under a simpler, flatter set of rules. This event forces a profound reevaluation of reality. If one dimension can be subtracted instantly by an unknown mechanism, then what guarantees the stability of the remaining two? Is this a precursor to a further contraction, perhaps down to a single line, a final point? Or is this new, flat existence the true stable substrate of existence, and our previous three-dimensional experience was merely a temporary, unstable phase? We must confront the idea that dimensionality is not a fundamental constant, but a mutable environmental property of spacetime. Conclusion. The universe, viewed from the outside of this transition, has sacrificed complexity for elegance. It has traded the infinite potential of volume for the stark beauty of the surface. Everything that was rich, textured, and volumetric is now defined only by its outline. Humanity, which chased expansion across three dimensions and dreamed of escaping them entirely, is reduced to a momentary shadow cast upon a vastly expanded, inert plane. But this reduction carries a strange, cold solace. If geometry dictates existence, and existence has been simplified, then perhaps the struggle for meaning also simplifies. Meaning was often sought in the exploration of complexity, the mastering of intricate spatial relationships. In a new reality, meaning might reside solely in persistence along the singular axis that remains. We're left not with failure, but with constraint. The universe has shown us the ultimate reduction. We cannot fight the dimensions we lack. We can only observe the absolute boundaries of what remains. In this infinitely thin existence, the only imperative is to continue tracing the line, accepting the cosmic decree that sometimes less is not just more, but everything. The flat plane waits silent and eternal, demanding only the next movement along its unbroken extent.